Officials in Glasgow are expected to approve a controversial plan to set up the UK's first so-called fix rooms, where drug addicts can inject heroin and also smoke the drug under supervision. The scheme aims to address the problems caused by an estimated 500 users who inject on Glasgow's streets. Our Scotland correspondent Lorna Gordon reports.
Glasgow is not unique in its problem with drugs, but it is looking at a unique way in the UK to try to deal with it. The paraphernalia of addiction is often just discarded after use. It can mean those living in parts of the city where users shoot up have to run the risk of dirty needles and syringes in the streets.
It's disgusting. Police are not doing much about it. So
the girl stays up here as well, and she went to put her baby in the pram, and there was needles in the kid's pram.
Now the authorities here are looking into providing supervised facilities to give addicts a safe space to inject or smoke illegal drugs without fear of arrest. One former long-term drug user told the BBC so-called fix rooms would not have helped him.
my using was 24 hours and I wanted to have somewhere to use all the time. I didn't want to just have to kind of book in or wait for somewhere to open. I wanted to be able to use my drugs as soon as I got them.
Supervised injecting facilities are already in use in a number of countries, including Australia, Denmark and Germany. Those who support the measures here point to these as proof they reduce the risk of harm to the wider community and specifically cut the number of drugs-related deaths.
There has not been one fatality, and that's really important. As well as that, it has other benefits, such as reduction in bloodborne viruses and getting people engaged with other services, such as housing and potentially treatment programs.
But there are others who think this could send the wrong message.
Harm reduction has been the predominant approach to tackling our drug problem for the last 20 years, and it has not succeeded. And this is just another instalment of that. Calling it a pragmatic response, in a sense, is just using words to cover up what it is. It's a green light to illegal drug use.
So-called fix rooms will prove controversial. If they do get the go-ahead here, many details such as where they'd be located and how exactly they would operate have still to be worked out. Lorna Gordon, BBC News, Glasgow.
Controversial plans to allow drug users to inject under supervision look set to go ahead in Glasgow, making it the first place in the UK to have so-called fix rooms. Our Home Affairs correspondent, Reva Alderson, reports.
The detritus of drug injectors in Glasgow city centre. Today, planners have been discussing a radical plan to cut the risks they pose of spreading HIV and hepatitis through needle sharing.
The place is overrun, people come from all over Glasgow. We've been trying to get it cleaned up more because of the kids and that. I'm scared in case the kids get hurted with the needles and that. I've caught them jagging at my clothes. Actually caught them jagging. Yeah, with the needles hanging out their arms. And I've chased them.
In Glasgow, it's estimated up to 500 addicts regularly inject in public places. Some would welcome the plan, which has been tried successfully around the world.
Safe injecting rooms would save a lot of lives, as in it'll lessen the risks that people already take taking drugs. Well, coming to places like this, as you can see, it's certainly not a safe place to be.
It's in areas like this, very close to Glasgow's shopping district, that addicts are injecting in public. And judging by the amount of drugs paraphernalia here, it's happening regularly and with a large number of people. The idea of this proposal is for injecting still to continue, but in clinics under medical supervision, which will allow the addicts to remain safe and also perhaps bring them into the drug treatment programs to get them ultimately drug-free.
Most of Europe is providing addiction services. There are safe consumption rooms. Switzerland has a model where there's heroin-assisted treatment and opiate replacement treatment that satisfies the needs of the population. So we really have to find a solution that brings the solutions elsewhere in the world to Glasgow.
It's a controversial plan, which some observers say is an admission that previous attempts to cut drug use and the rising tide of deaths have failed.
We have a drug problem that's 30 years in its evolution, and we are still talking about drug users who are not in contact with services. We are throwing hundreds of millions of pounds at our treatment services, and they're still failing to contact our drug users. That's a scandal, actually, Revel, which our politicians and our public should be rightly exercised about.
The plan's been approved in principle, and drugs workers have welcomed the move.
When we look at our rising numbers of drug-related deaths, if we're really serious about reducing the harms associated with problematic drug use, then we need to be using all types of services, all evidence-based approaches to making sure that we can try and reduce the harms caused by problem drug use.
But before a clinic can be established in the city centre, details on cost, where it would be, and how it would operate must first be ironed out. Revel Alderson reporting Scotland, Glasgow.
Is providing a safe place for people to inject drugs under supervision the way forward, or simply enabling harmful behaviour? Hello and welcome to Scotland 2016. Plans for so-called fix rooms for drug addicts have been given the go-ahead in Glasgow. We'll hear from experts and from those in recovery. The living wage workers receive is going up, but how is the amount we need to live on calculated? And in the US, the FBI is investigating Hillary Clinton's emails. We get the view from across the pond. A partnership of counsellors, police and health professionals has given approval in principle for Glasgow to set up self-injection rooms, or so-called fix rooms. They'd be safe places where addicts could take their drugs under supervision. More details of exactly where and how it's planned to provide what's officially known as safer consumption facilities will be given in the new year. We'll debate the pros and cons in a moment. First, Hugh Williams has been hearing from two people who've been clean for the past 3 years, but who know firsthand what life is like as an addict. You may find some of the details distressing.
By the time I'd reached my teenage years, this community had witnessed a real explosion within drugs. Lots of drugs had come into the community, and my friends and everybody I was palling about with kind of just started using drugs.
I mean, it was a progression from when I was at high school, about 14, getting involved with alcohol, experimenting with hash, and then it was a progression. I left home quite early, 16, went to university in Edinburgh to study psychology, and quickly get involved with different music scenes and progress through whatever drugs were involved with that kind of dance scene at the time. I never ever thought I would use heroin, but in my final year at university I did.
Getting in and out of prison, and then I thought, you know what, I'm injecting drugs, and then that brings a whole new set of problems, which is abscesses, infections, blood clots, and then that brings me to the attention, takes me to accident emergency and being in and out of hospitals.
I reached my rock bottom, and for me that was that, you know, I had had 2 lengthy hospital admissions. You know, I had, you know, split up with my partner. You know, I had isolated myself from a lot of people, and I was desperate. And I knew that if I continued to use drugs, that ultimately I could end up dying.
I've had friends who I grew up with through schools who have died in this community as a result of addiction and drug overdoses and stuff like that. I've had friends who have had experience, who have died with the anthrax scare, who have lost limbs through injecting heroin tainted with anthrax. But I always had that ability, and it's to kind of lie to myself and convince myself that that would never happen to me.
You know, there were occasions where I had to travel into the city centre to buy drugs, and I did end up using drugs in in flats and places that were quite chaotic with people that I didn't know and people that I didn't necessarily want to be with. And I think now that if there had been a supervised consumption room available, that I could have gone there and then I could maybe have got access to the help that I needed at an earlier stage.
Remove the chaos for their lives and you might just find that they don't want to do it anymore.
And why is a safe injection room key to removing the chaos?
Because it's removing them sneaking about up lanes, it's removing them the chaos involved with having to run and get needles, having to seek somewhere to inject, overdosing up city centre streets. It also keeps them safe.
For a lot of people, it's like just for somebody to come and say, hi, how are you doing? Means a lot. And I think, you know, people, society as a whole has to start looking at these people and helping them to reduce the damage that they're doing to themselves, because quite often they're already damaged people.
That report from Hugh Williams and producer Emma Clifford-Bell. Well, joining me now to discuss today's developments are Kirsten Horsburgh from the Scottish Drugs Forum, who's in Dundee for us, and Dr Ian Oliver, who was Chief Constable of both Grampian and Central Scotland Police, and he's now a member of the Institute on Global Drug Policy, and he's in Edinburgh. A very good evening to both of you, and thanks for joining us. Kirsten, I'll come to you first, and I'm just wondering what you think about this idea and whether you think it's the best solution for injecting drug users.
Hi, good evening. I do actually think it is I'm very proud of the way that Glasgow has taken forward this proposal. This time last year, I spent 2 weeks in Sydney's medically supervised injecting centre and saw the clear benefits that these services can provide. I don't think that it's the only solution, absolutely not, but I think as part of an evidence-based strategy to try and reduce drug-related deaths and try and reduce some of the harms that are caused by problematic drug use, I think it's a fantastic step forward.
And Dr Oliver, you've also looked at international examples, but I don't think you share the thought that this is the best way forward. What do you think is wrong with this idea?
Well, what's clearly wrong with the idea is that unless you repeal the Misuse of Drugs Act, the idea is totally illegal. It would be completely and absolutely against the law to do what is being proposed. And we hear people talking in good faith about evidence-based research and what's gone on elsewhere around the world. United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime is against these sites. I have worked in the one in Vancouver. I have seen what goes on there. And the primary objective of any government must be, rather like the medical profession, first to do no harm. And therefore it should not be doing anything that promotes the continuation of drug use or the misuse of drugs. And certainly the idea of people taking their own drugs into a place to inject them is verging on the totally irresponsible. I can't see that will in any way reduce deaths, the spread of communicable diseases, prevent people from continuing to take drugs. And the other thing that you have to bear in mind is even if you did have the legal authority to set up these injecting rooms, you don't really think that people that are on heroin are just going to use their drugs in the injecting room. They will still continue to use them on the streets 24 hours a day. And I haven't heard a proposal that these rooms are to be open 24 hours a day. So it really isn't doing anything to reduce drugs. And the only way, in reality, in the ideal world, I admit, but the only way is for people who want to get off drugs to get rehabilitation and education.
On the legal issue, the Lord Advocate would have to give the permission to repeal the Misuse of Drugs Act. Kirsten, coming back to you,
well,
do you think
before you do go back, with respect, I don't think the Lord Advocate's got the authority to do that. The misuse of drugs is dealt with from Westminster. It's not a devolved thing, and you can't just suddenly say we're going to repeal the Misuse of Drugs Act in Scotland and not have it operating here. It's from Westminster, and I think that the likelihood of that happening is very, very unlikely.
Kirsten, if the legal ability was there, is the political will there to do this? The Scottish Government's already said today it has no intention of looking at this on a nationwide scale.
Yeah, so there have been lots of discussions, obviously. I mean, now that the full business case has been approved to go ahead, those discussions will now become more formalised, and certainly the key stakeholders will have discussions about it.
Just going back to a point that Dr. Oliver made there, he talked about first do no harm. Well, I would say that these facilities first reduce the harms, and I think that's what we should be focusing on, is reducing the harms that are caused by problem drug use. And sometimes that's starting at the very, very basics by providing a service that people can access. We already provide people with sterile injecting equipment. Providing people with a sterile environment in which to use drugs is a natural and obvious next step.
But does it not just enable their habit? Is it actually addressing the habit, and is there evidence that that's what has happened, that it can actually reduce addiction?
Yeah, so that was another thing Dr. Oliver raised there about the evidence. There are no less than 135 published research papers showing the clear benefits of these services. Some of those are about reducing drug-related deaths. There have been 0 overdose fatalities in any supervised injecting centre anywhere in the world. There are around 90 of these facilities. They've been operating for 30 years. They also reduce the incidence of bloodborne viruses because they provide access to sterile injecting equipment. But I think more importantly overall, what they do is they provide a dignified and respectful and compassionate service to some of the most marginalised and vulnerable people in our society. So just treating people as human beings and being able to get them in the door to a service that can link them into other services that can help them address some of the problems that they're having in their lives. Sometimes for people, the drugs aren't the biggest problem in their lives, and it's been their traumatic pasts.
Okay, Dr. Oliver, on that
homeless situation.
On that issue, Dr. Oliver, of chaos, we heard there in the film from Claire and Thomas, both saying that the chaos in their lives made it harder to address, and that if they'd been in an environment like that where support was available, it might have been different. Do you accept that could be the case?
No, it's really perpetuating the use of drugs, which is what we're supposed to be opposing. And I don't think that the overwhelming evidence from around the world indicates what your lady in Dundee is saying.
What's the best way to deal with it then, if this isn't the right way?
Well, obviously the best way, if it were possible, and we're talking in many respects about the ideal, and I know that isn't always achievable, but people, one, have got to get to the wish to get off drugs, and two, they've got to be helped with rehabilitation. People already now have been getting prescribed heroin since as long ago as 1920 in a limited number of cases. But all that does is perpetuate the drug use. And the other thing that it also does is, if you set up just one centre in Glasgow, if that were legally possible, and at the moment I don't believe for 1 minute that it is, if that were legally possible, you're sending out the message to people, vulnerable people, young and impressionable people, well, drugs aren't all that bad, because if I get into problems, I can go and get help, and I'll get off them. It doesn't work like that. Deaths do not reduce. The spread of diseases is not reduced, and that's been the case from Australia, Netherlands,
Kirsten,
Germany.
a very quick last word from you. What's your response to that?
Yeah, I respectfully completely disagree with the points made there, and certainly the evidence is very strong from all of the areas and all of the published papers about the centres. Having spent 2 weeks in the Sydney Centre, I can clearly say that the evidence is there for reducing all of those things that Dr. Oliver states isn't the case. I think there would be clear work going forward with the Crown Office to address some of the legal issues in Scotland.
Okay.
And certainly we hope that will be the case.
Kirsten, Horsburgh and Dr. Ian Oliver, many thanks to both of you for joining us.
Thank you.
And with me this evening to talk about some of the day's news is the law lecturer and columnist Andrew Tickell, and from Oxfam UK, Catherine Trebek. A very good evening to you both. Andrew, I'll start by asking you about these so-called fixed rooms, which are possibly going to happen in Glasgow. Do you think they're a good idea?
I think they are in general. From my point of view, I think harm reduction in terms of drugs is the strategy to do this. And maybe from a legal point of view, it is kind of curious, though, that misuse of drugs is a reserved matter. So Holyrood really doesn't have much policy autonomy here, and it's very unlikely, I think, that Theresa May's government would pursue this kind of thing. So it kind of shows you these wrinkles in how we deal with drugs policy. It seems to me very pragmatic, practical. You know, we don't live in the best of all possible worlds, and trying to reduce all of the range of social harms from on drugs seems to be eminently sensible and actually quite courageous. And people are often criticising Scottish public authorities for not being as courageous as they can be. This strikes me as nothing else than courageous.
Catherine, legal and political hurdles aside, do you think that it could be something, or should be something, that's tried out at least?
Absolutely. I mean, I think we need to try everything. We need to admit that our country does have a very desperate drug problem, and to ignore that is to perpetuate it. And so what we need to do is offer people a safe, clean space to inject, but also where they'll come into contact with social workers that hopefully will set them on the path to recovery. This is a grown-up reaction to a very, very serious problem, and I think the word fix is key there. It's not just a hit room to get the hit, it's about fixing people, and that's fantastic.
Andrew, do you think location could be a problem though? Is this something people would want to live or work beside?
I suppose, the explanations we've had today are that these are going to be in places where we already have social problems in terms of drugs. So it's not places, we're not going to be installing these in places where, the feelings, the problems you've identified aren't really felt by these kind of communities. So though you can understand the kind of NIMBY feeling, not in my backyard, but actually if what's in your backyard is needles already, then why not welcome somewhere where you can actually try and address these underlying problems and really take that off the streets and into safer environments where other kind of help is available.
And Catherine, it doesn't address rural drug problems, which are actually a big problem in Scotland.
And similarly, it also doesn't address root causes. And I think it's a band-aid, it's a very welcome band-aid or sticking plaster. But until we really look to why people are turning to drugs and alcohol, to maybe put a stop over some of their problems, why we look at why people are experiencing chaotic lives. I mean, there's been a spate of reports in the last few months looking at the increasing loneliness, the increasing stress and anxiety, the increasing precarious work. We need to ask those hard questions. What is the very nature of our economy doing to people that is forcing them to turn to drugs? And until we really have a long, hard look at the structure of the economy, then these will just be sticking plasters, albeit very welcome ones.
Well, another big
Getting a fix. Drug addicts in Glasgow are set to be given dedicated rooms to inject heroin. Will the plan reduce harm or encourage misuse? We debate the arguments. And a view from the north, a former foreign minister of Iceland gives us his take on Scotland after Brexit. Drug addicts in Glasgow are set to be allowed to inject heroin under plans to open state-sanctioned fix rooms. The controversial plan has been agreed in principle by the police, the City Council and the NHS Board. Here's STV's senior reporter, Sharon Fruit.
Fix rooms, a shooting gallery, a drug consumption room. They've been given different names, but they have one aim. All are designed to be a sterile environment where drug addicts can inject under medical supervision. This one opened earlier this month in a hospital in Paris.
Officials say it's the scale of public injecting on Glasgow's streets that justifies the introduction of this new facility. It's estimated that there are around 500 users injecting heroin in places such as waste grounds, derelict buildings and car parks. They're then discarding their used needles.
They don't have anywhere else to go. They're homeless, or they may be in hostels where they're not allowed to take drugs back to.
These outreach workers prepare for another shift. Last year, teams distributed almost 13,000 sterile needles to habitual users who don't engage with existing drug services.
If somebody was to overdose in a consumption room, then there would be somebody on hand there to administer something like naloxone.
Especially where public injecting is happening, I'm sure that those communities would welcome this, because they're the ones who are seeing the discarded equipment in their closes, who are maybe meeting people who are on their way for a hit or on their way back from a hit.
Last year saw a 15% increase in drug-related deaths in Glasgow. In the same 12 months, there was an HIV outbreak with 47 new infections. The annual average has consistently been around 10.
We want a service where there's wraparound services, so it's not just somewhere that people come and can use drugs, that there's actually access to healthcare, social care, homelessness, those type of wraparound services, and that there's a move-on approach, so we're moving people from harm reduction potentially through to recovery.
There are 90 drug consumption centres worldwide in 10 different countries, mostly in Europe. The Netherlands has 31 rooms, Germany has 24.
I think it's dangerous to say other countries are doing it, so we should do it as well. I think that we need to determine what's most appropriate for our drug problem. That certainly involves looking at other countries, but it doesn't mean slavishly following what's being done in other countries. Our research has shown that residential rehabilitation is the most effective means to get addicts into a state of recovery. Those services are scant in Scotland.
Today's meeting was just the first step. Full details of the business case and any legal implications will be brought back before officials next February.
We assessed the merits of the plan with David Liddell, Director of the Scottish Drugs Forum, and Professor Neil McKegney, Director of the Centre for Substance Use Research. Neil McKegney, experience in Europe suggests dramatic cuts in crime, people taking fewer drugs. It helps people beat addiction. This has got to be a good idea, surely.
Well, actually, the evidence isn't strong that it helps people beat addiction. I mean, there's no question you can have a centre like that. You can attract drug users to it, and whilst they're using drugs within the centre, they are at much lower risk. The uncertainty in my mind, really, is whether it is the contribution it makes to tackling the drugs problem more broadly. I mean, we know that there's something about 13,000 problem drug users in Glasgow. Now, if only a fraction of those attend one clinic, I think we will see sites in Glasgow Centre, if that's the location that's chosen for it, which are quite unprecedented. But, you know, this, although it's being widely discussed now, it may not even be legal. It's governed by drug laws, governed by the Misuse of Drugs Act, which is national legislation from Westminster. It would be unprecedented for Scotland to claim that it should be withdraw from the Misuse of Drugs Act to enable such a facility to be set up. So I'd be surprised, to be honest, even given the enthusiasm within Glasgow, if it were judged to be appropriate and legal.
A couple of points there, David Liddell. Just the very first one, though, why are you supportive of the plan?
Well, basically, as has been well outlined, we've got 500 public injectors in Glasgow who are very vulnerable long-term problem drug users, and we've failed to engage with them really properly over recent years. So the purpose of this is to reach out to that group and start to engage with them more effectively. So we're actually moving that street injecting in alleys in Glasgow into a more controlled environment where they can be supervised and have regular contact. So it's about building trust and a relationship with individuals, so that the whole range of problems that people are facing, such as mental health, homelessness, as well as their drug problem, can be effectively dealt with over the long term. So it's primarily about reaching out and engagement to them as a first point of access to services.
What about that very key point that Neil McKegney made, though? This is illegal.
Well, I think we've seen a number of programs over recent years that have had what's called a letter of comfort from the Lord Advocate. Now, I would see this as operating potentially in the same way. Obviously, that's still to be explored in terms of the detail of that, but it would allow for such a service to operate with a, say, appropriate letter of comfort, basically describing how that the service would not be liable to prosecution if it operated within certain parameters. So that's, I think, the way that it probably would develop. And certainly Ireland has gone down the route of primary legislation to put this in place.
Okay.
But there's strong suggestions that Scotland won't need to do that.
Neil McKegney, David Liddell was saying that it helps people with mental health. It puts drug users perhaps in touch with services that they perhaps otherwise wouldn't come into contact with.
Yes, David's absolutely right, actually, when he says it's born of failure. It's born of the failure of our drug treatment services in Glasgow, and not just in Glasgow, to attract these high-risk, very vulnerable drug injectors, even despite the fact that our drug treatment system is very, very well funded. Multi-million pounds a year is directed at drug treatment services, and yet they're failing.
Why is that?
One of the things that really does concern me here, we have a residential drug treatment service in the Borders called Castle Craig. It's an abstinence-based programme. Do you know how many drug users are referred to it from Glasgow? None. Last year, none. The previous year, none. So here we have an addiction service in Glasgow, which is not even finding the money to send a single drug user into residential recovery at this clinic, and yet seems to support a limitless amount of funding to support this new initiative. Now, it's not a drug consumption room I think we need in Glasgow. It's a review of exactly what are the failures of Glasgow's addiction services, because we should not now be talking about 500 drug injectors in Glasgow who are not in contact with services. Our services should be out there vigorously contacting these individuals and getting them into recovery-based treatment. And I think it's a legitimate question to ask, why are our services, our addiction services in Glasgow, failing to make contact with these drug injectors?
David Liddell.
Well, I think there's a whole series of questions there. If we can concentrate on the particular issues around this service, I'm not sure quite what Neil is saying. Is he against such a service, or is he for such provision? I think we've seen across the whole of the UK and other countries the importance of that swift access to services, and that's what this sort of provision would provide. I mean, why is it that, for example, the Netherlands and Germany have large numbers of these services? And certainly when you talk to workers in those countries, they're really amazed that we don't have this as the first line treatment. So let's not get caught up in terms of the whole range of provision. We're talking about swift access at the front end.
And very briefly on that point, Neil McCaig.
Well, it's swift access, as David says, but from where do you go from that point? It seems to me that yes, you can contact these drug injectors, but we are failing to get them into abstinence-based recovery, and that failure is more evident in Glasgow than anywhere else.
And very finally, David Liddell, is this scheme affordable? Is it more expensive than other schemes?
Well, I think you have to look at it firstly on the grounds of compassion, but also secondly in terms of the potential cost savings to society at large, and particularly to savings to the wider health service. You only have to look at that outbreak of 70 people with HIV infection in Glasgow, and the long-term costs of that are significant.
Okay.
If we can stop that outbreak, that will pay for the service itself.
David Liddell, Professor Neil McCaig, thank you both for joining us in Scotland tonight. Thank you.